Whilst Norwegian Vikings had been island hopping across the North Sea to raid Anglo-Saxon, Irish, Scottish, Pictish and Welsh monasteries since the end of the 8th century, their Danish counterparts tended to focus upon the vast and rich remnants of Charlemagne's Francia just to their southern flank in mainland Europe. These raiders included such famous sea kings as Ragnar Lothbrok and Haston, along with dynastic rulers in Denmark such as King Horik. By the late 830s, however, some of the most ambitious of these piratical raiders on the continent began to look northwards to Britain and Ireland to raid. Whilst the Anglo-Saxon and Gaelic kingdoms of Britain and Ireland weren't as prosperous or as rich as Francia, they were nowhere near as used to the annual raids which now plagued the European mainland. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were probed for weaknesses, and for now at least, some of the Danish raiders in Francia seem to have opted to go to Ireland instead, the focal point of Gaelic Christianity and an island that had just recently embarked upon a golden age of culture. There they came into contact with their northern brethren from Norway, who seemed to have already set themselves up to a certain extent upon the outlying isles around modern-day Scotland since they had first raided there at the tail end of the 8th century. In around 837, in an event which would reverberate with horror throughout the Irish contemporary chronicles of the time, a fresh fleet appeared upon the Irish coast. It was led by a battle-hardened sea king, the first to be called such in the Irish sources, which refer to his fleet as a royal one. Along with a vast fleet of 120 ships, Thorgest had arrived, and everything in Ireland was about to change. Thorgest, often Gaelicised in the Irish sources as Tugesius, seems to have had dynastic links of some kind back in Scandinavia, and he seems to have used this influence to bring together the various factions already in Ireland under his leadership. He had probably been periodically raiding in Ireland since as early as 820, and almost certainly had a good idea of the geography of the island, both from his own men and from Irish prisoners. The location of monasteries would have been important intelligence to establish, as was an understanding of the political situation. As such, it seems entirely possible that the exact timing of the arrival was not random. Ireland in the 830s was divided amongst a multitude of petty kingdoms and chieftains, yet they were loosely aligned to two royal centres of power, one at Tara, where the largely symbolic title of High King of Ireland was crowned periodically to kings of the influential dynasty throughout the early to mid-medieval period. The other was in the south, at Munster, where the great king Brian Boru would be born a century later. At the time of Thorgest's arrival, however, the armies of Munster had just marched to battle against Tara, plunging the Midlands into chaos. In other words, Thorgest could not have arrived at a better time. Thorgest immediately made it clear that he was a different sort of invader. Danish Vikings had been overwintering in Francia for decades, and likewise Norsemen had been doing the same on the northern isles of Britain, and now Thorgest aimed to do the same in Ireland, yet he probably had no intention of stopping there, likely planning on an outright conquest of the entire island. The first signal of his intent was his choice to sack the most important holy site in Ireland, and by extension, one of the most important in Europe at the time, the monastic cathedral complex at Armagh, which he annihilated in 839. St. Patrick himself, the patron saint of Ireland, had ordained the complex at Armagh as the centre of Gaelic Christianity. Schools, relics and monks alike were slashed apart and put to the torch. In a final grisly act against the opposing faith of the Irish, Thorgest made a sacrifice to Odin upon St. Patrick's altar. As far as he was concerned, this was a holy war, and the Irish responded in kind, rising up in outrage against the atrocity against their faith. Thorgest remained at Armagh for the winter, as more and more longships from all over Europe rode up the Irish river systems to rally to his cause. Like never before, the waterways and coastlines of Ireland were now filled with piratical raiders from beyond the sea. By 841, Thorgest had seized a small settlement on the River Liffey, just to the south of Tara, on an excellent natural harbour with easy fording across the river. There, he established a strong defensible position by incorporating his longships into the defences of the new town. in an arrangement called a long fort, the first of many to spring up in Ireland. According to the Irish sources, it was around this time that Thorgest had himself grandly declared as the king of all the foreigners in Ireland, a title which would continue to be used by his kinsmen for centuries to come. The settlement came to be known as Dublin, and ominously, for the rest of the kingdoms of Britain and Ireland, its location was a mere stone's throw away. Dublin, the first truly Viking state in Western Europe, would prove to be a scourge for generations to come. Unlike in Francia, where successes had been fleeting and largely temporary up until this point, the Danes and Norsemen in Ireland were there to stay.